Right. Madam Chair, would you like to call the meeting to order and then we can proceed with the roll call?
Sure, I'd like to call the meeting to order.
All right. So I'll do the roll call. Albany County members first. Mike Apostle. Bill Bruce.
Here, present.
Lucy McKnight's not able to join us. Larry Schillinger. And Kristen Swinton is here. Rensselaer County, Scott Bendette.
Present.
Judy Bressler.
Here.
James Shaughnessy.
Here.
Mike Stammel.
Here.
Jackie Stallone.
Here.
Saratoga County, Joe Grasso.
Here.
Opal Hins.
Here.
Jason Kemper.
Here.
Amy Standard was not able to join us today, and Craig Warner.
Here.
Schenectady County, Don Ackerman. I thought I saw Don join us
I thought I
before.
saw him too.
David Hogenkamp,
Here.
Gary Hughes,
Present.
Joe Landry, and Barbara Morrow. Barbara's here. Okay, with that, we have established a quorum.
Okay, the first item is the September 30th, 2020 meeting minutes. Everyone has a copy. Does anyone have any questions or corrections?
No.
Okay, could I have a motion to approve?
Motion made.
Second? All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Then the minutes are accepted. The next item is the financial statements through September 30th, 2020.
Okay, I'm just going to share my screen if you don't mind. Can everyone see my screen?
Yep.
Yes.
Yes.
All right, presented to you are the financials through September 30th. Third quarter invoices are being developed for our funding agencies. Receivables due to CDRPC from NYSERDA for August and September will be updated once a new contract is executed and we can draw down those funds retroactively. And that will increase revenues after the fact for August and September. Final billings for the year were sent to Schenectady and Saratoga counties. Revenues are tracking at 67.8% to budget, and expenses are at 74%, par is 75. On the revenue side, the CARES Act revenue that we budgeted in accounts for the underperformance to par on the revenue side. It's looking like at this point that we're not going to be able to spend or distribute that $100,000 within this calendar year. So just wanted to flag that for you. As noted on the balance sheet, we have just over $242,000 of cash in the bank with total receivables just over $245,000. Any questions on the financial statements?
No, if there's no questions, could I have a motion to approve the financial statements through September 30th, 2020?
I'll make that motion.
Motion.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Seconded, you're talking the same time.
Jason, second.
David,
We'll go with Craig.
Craig, okay. We'll go with Craig.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Then the statements are approved. The next item is the budget amendment memo 2022.
All right. This is a budget amendment simply to increase anticipated revenues now that we have actually been awarded the NYSERDA grant to cover the salaries and benefits for our outreach coordinators. The budget amendment proposes $95,000 increase to the revenue line and a $60,000 increase to the expense line. I would also note that the memo includes a line that should be removed related to the EDA CARES Act. That was an action that we took at the last meeting that I did not delete from the memo. Any questions?
If there's no questions, could I have a motion to approve the budget amendment?
Motion made, Mike Stanley.
And
Second, Bill Bruce.
Thank you.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Then the amendment's approved. The next item is the 2019 Audit Memo 2023.
So thankfully, at our October meeting, we'll be able to present the 2019 audit. I'd just like to thank Tom White, our financial officer, and accountants from Marvin & Company, Heather and Sean, who did a great job at getting us over the finish line, and dealing with, a number of delays related to the pandemic. So I just wanted to provide a recap to 2019. So in 2019, CDRPC made a lot of changes to our bookkeeping and accounting functions, including consolidating those operations from 4 people down to 2 people, consolidating our QuickBooks for all of our corporate entities into an enterprise account that we administer as backed up on a regular basis. In addition, we were pleased to welcome Amy as a new office manager in early 2019. These are the context for the changes. During this changes and, with Tom's oversight, we instituted we audited a lot of processes and we improved a lot of processes. However, in this year's audit, did reveal a couple corrections. The first correction, significant correction, relates to an $18,000 adjustment that needed to be made to 2019 revenues. We mistakenly booked those revenues to 2020 rather than to the December in 2019. We instituted more controls and an adequate check towards the end of the year to ensure that accruals are reviewed and corrected as needed before financial statements are presented to our auditors. In addition, the audit revealed a number of voided checks for which no copies could be found. This is partially a function that we changed our financial officer from Tim Canty, who previously would receive checks, to Tom White. And we also made some improvements to ensure that our digital records in QuickBooks accurately reflect the full financial record, including any checks that may be voided. Hard copies of those checks additionally are kept with related transactions. And we've instituted and this relates to more so to incoming checks, a check log to be able to track checks and check numbers for incoming deposits. So with that, I'll turn it over to our auditors, Sean and Heather, to provide an overview of the audit. And I'll just quickly change screens here to bring up the copies of the audits. Unless you guys want to share them, Heather or Sean.
Whatever is easiest for you is fine.
Okay, I'll just bring them up.
Okay.
Which one are you starting with?
The financial statements, please.
Okay.
So the financial statements, so you've engaged us to audit your financial statements. We're responsible for giving a report on your financial statements. Management's responsible for making sure those financial statements are fairly stated and in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles, and that they have good internal controls in place. So if you want to go back to the audit report. So we want to make sure they have good internal controls in place. Our responsibility is to express an opinion and perform various audit procedures. We have to follow generally accepted auditing standards as well as government auditing standards. And we do test your controls. We do consider your controls, but we don't give an opinion on them. Your financial statements have estimates, and we believe everything that we've done is sufficient to provide a basis for our opinion. And our opinion is right on the next page. So we believe your financial statements are fairly stated in all material respects in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. So that's considered an unmodified opinion, a clean opinion, highest level of assurance that we can provide. The next paragraph required supplemental information. So there is some information that's required by certain standards that's in your financial statements. We don't express an opinion on them, but we do review them as part of the audit process. And then there's another audit report in accordance with government auditing standards that we'll go through. And this paragraph just lets you know it's important to consider that report as well. So then the next section is your management discussion and analysis. This is an important part of the financial statements. It kind of explains the numbers and gives some background and some information, as well as explain some of the actual statements themselves. So I didn't have anything I wanted to point out here. So if you want to go to page 9 of the PDF, this is where your actual financial statements start. So this first page is your full accrual financial statements. If you want to go back 2 pages.
Oh, sorry.
No problem. So these are your full accrual financial statements. So these include all your long-term assets and your long-term liabilities. In your case, your long-term asset is your capital asset, which is pretty insignificant, your deferred outflows. And then if you keep going down on the liability side, it's your net pension liability and your deferred inflows. So that net pension liability, that's your participation in the employee's retirement system. So while this shows up as a liability, it's not something that is really due and payable by the commission. It's really something that is, forward looking. It's just a calculation based on your participation in that plan. I want to go ahead to the next statement. This is consistent with previous year. Nothing really has changed here. Presentation wise, it is consistent. You go right on to the next statement. So these next 2 statements, your balance sheet, and the next statement is considered your modified accrual. So it's more of a short-term look. So it doesn't include your long-term liabilities or your long-term assets. Overall, you're pretty consistent. Your split between AR, accounts receivable, and due from other governments is slightly different, but that had to do with the NYSERDA grant. But it's relatively consistent with the previous year. And then actually, if you want to just go right ahead and skip to page, 34 of the PDF, there's just one footnote that is new. Everything else is pretty consistent. There were no new standards that were required to be adopted that had any significant change. So the footnotes themselves stayed consistent. But this footnote here, footnote number 12, obviously we're in the middle of the COVID pandemic. So this is really a disclosure because that all happened after year end. It's just alerting the users that there could be changes in the operations of the commission, and there could be things that are unexpected that you're not able to quite plan for at this time because they're unknown. So that's just alerting the users to that fact, and that is really it as far as the footnotes. So if you want to keep on going to, let's see, yes, your budget to actual page here. So your budget to actual, you have a favorable budget variance. So your revenues came in over budget by about 51,000. Your expenditures came in under budget by about 40,000. So overall, you have a favorable variance of 91,000. So that's good information to have. And then if you want to go to the next audit report.
Sure thing. 1 second. Okay, that's the 260.
No, you can go to the 260. I'll just talk about there was another audit report, the Government Auditing Standards Report. So we have to consider your internal controls as part of our audit process. And that report lets you know that we considered them. We don't give an opinion on them, but it also lets you know that there were no deficiencies that were identified, no significant deficiency or material weakness that were required to report. And then it also lets you know that we have to consider your compliance with laws and regulations and that we did not identify any instances of non-compliance that we would need to bring to your attention. So again, that's a clean report as well. And then I'm actually going to turn it over to Sean and he can go through the 260 letter and the 265 letter with you. If there's any questions on the financial statements, I'd be happy to answer those as well.
Thanks, Heather. And thank you again, Mark, for having us today. So you can start by pulling up the 260 letter here. So this letter is a report that is issued to those charged with governance, which is everybody at this meeting. And we use this report to basically identify any other significant matters regarding the plan scope and the timing of the audit.
And sorry to interrupt. Can everyone see the letter?
Mm-hmm.
Great, thanks.
So the first part of the letter just kind of talks about any new accounting policies or things that changed during the year. As kind of Heather had mentioned, there were no new policies or nothing had changed from 2018. The next part kind of talks about some estimates. During 2019 and consistent with 2018, the most sensitive estimates affecting CDRPC is the pension plan and the capital assets, just as Heather has kind of described in the financial statements before, in the difference between the fund accounting versus the government-wide accounting. Scrolling down a little bit more, so during 2019, we didn't encounter any difficulties in dealing with management or completing the audit. Mark, just kind of as you mentioned in here, we also like to identify the one material misstatement that was adjusted and further corrected by you guys. The adjustment was to increase the accounts receivable and the revenue by the $18,000. This was relating to the NYSERDA contract. The original invoice that we looked at did not reflect the date or period, but it was originally posted to January 2020, and then through further investigation, it was identified for the milestones were actually satisfied in December of 2019. So the entry was corrected and everything moved forward with no issues. A little bit further down, we just kind of go into if there were any disagreements with management, which there was none. It was a very good year, and no other issues or findings really to note. So we can also, at this time, we can go to the 265 letter mark if you want to pull that one up.
All right, just give me 1 second.
Yep. So this letter is used to identify any deficiencies in the internal control in addition to any material weaknesses. So kind of Mark pretty much touched on all of these, so you can probably scroll right to the bottom here, Mark.
Can you guys see it still? Is it moving?
It's not moving, but
It
it's
says
there.
my screen sharing is paused. Hang on, let me just do it again. Okay,
You can go
See it
right
now?
down to the bottom. Yep. So we have our three recommendations, kind of findings this year. One, which we've already spoken about, that was the general ledger entries. This related to the $18,000, as I had mentioned before. So kind of like Mark has mentioned, you guys have really, implemented new procedures and stuff to kind of change your, the way you're accounting for things. So the recommendation would be to just do a more thorough review of the year-end entries to make sure everything kind of gets recorded in the proper period. Which you guys are, implementing that moving forward. And the other one, which you had also mentioned, Mark, was just the check support. And I know this was the change from Tim from before to now Tom. So I think moving forward, we're going to have no issues there. But, it's just keeping documentation and tracking for all of the voided checks.
always have to show your work.
Yep. And then lastly is the information technology. So every other year, Marvin, what we'd like to do is we like to give our clients a detailed IT questionnaire to help us identify any high-risk areas and recommendations, especially in the vulnerability of the IT market of kind of where we're at today in society. So the two that we did note this year was that there was no computer incident data breach policy in place, and then the IT systems are not adequately protected against fire, overheating, damage due to water, over voltage or power failure. These are by no major big concerns or anything. This is more of just kind of like big picture, recommendations. And a lot of these things should be, further discussed with the team on whether they're even cost beneficial for you guys in a sense. So I think over the years though, we've really, or CDRPC has really been able to, minimize this list and kind of make this a crucial key point on, tackling some of these tasks, which, working with you guys over the past couple of years, you guys have. So, management has put forth great effort into getting their IT up to date, which kind of mentioned before is really important, especially in the world we live in today. So that's pretty much it. There was no other recommendations to note. And if anybody has any questions or anything like that, I'd be happy to answer.
Great. Thank you, Sean.
Thank you.
Just like to thank Sean and Heather Lewis again for working with us this year. And I'd also like to recognize Tom White, who's here, who you may not have met before, our new financial officer, Tom. I want to give a wave so people know who you are. And also Amy. They've worked very, very well together over the course of the last year to really, I think, dial in some of our financial protocols and procedures. So Tom, and I'd like to thank particularly Tom because he came to the table, with a lot of experience in accounting, organizational accounting, nonprofit accounting, government accounting. And I think he was really able to professionalize a lot of the processes that we have in place. So Tom, do you want to say anything about, some of the changes that we've implemented over the last year?
Well, I think the most important thing is the consolidation of the accounting systems in one place, so it's housed within our server, as well as protected with our overnight backups. So that takes out of the picture multiple locations and multiple things that had to be looked at. When Tim was working, he would be needing to jump between different accounts and different processes. By consolidating that, we made things a lot more efficient. Another thing is I do everything at the office. So things like checks don't go home with me, things like that. Even though I work from home, I make sure all the paperwork stays and get put away in the office so that it's not lost or misplaced or hard to find. So we continue to look at these things, and we continue to do the things we need to do to make things more efficient and more accurate in the long run.
Great. Thanks so much, Tom. Appreciate it.
Mark, I just had a quick question. I couldn't get the mute off quick enough before. On the first letter from the Marvin and Company, they noted in there in other comments that they didn't do an RSI audit. Is that something we should do on a regular basis, or is it something that we should have a separate firm look at?
So the required supplemental information, which is the RSI, is just additional information that's required by the standards to be included in your financial statements. And there's no requirement to have it audited. While we, yes, do look at it and we make sure the numbers and stuff tie out, you don't have a requirement to have a separate audit over it. It's just some other information that's included in your financials. So what you're having done is completely expected and appropriate.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? If not, could I have a motion to accept the 2019 audit?
So moved.
Second?
No.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Then the audit's accepted. The next item on the agenda is appointing a nominating committee.
All right, let me just share my screen quickly again. So annually, CDRPC appoints a nominating committee to identify the slate of officers that will be seated at our next annual meeting, which is the January 2021 meeting of the board. The officer positions are chair, first vice chair, second vice chair, and secretary treasurer. I've pasted the officer duties in my memo. So the task here is for the committee is just to confirm those representatives in those seats. Typically, as we all know, those positions rotate. So Albany County is currently serving as chair, which means the representative that would be appointed on the slate of officers for the 2021 term would rotate to the secretary treasurer. Representative from Rensselaer County would likely elevate to chair. Representative from Saratoga County will likely go to the first vice chair, and the Schenectady representative would go to the second vice chair position. So this is an exercise of looking for volunteers to herd some cats.
I will volunteer.
Barbara volunteers. Anybody else?
How many volunteers are you looking for, Mark?
It can be one person. It can be more than one person. It's really up to the commission.
Yeah, it's just a committee that works over the phone pretty much, right? So
Yeah. I
In
was
the
gonna
past,
say-
when I've done this, I've sent emails to the current officers to see if they want to roll up into the next position. But then there's a little more work with the county that has to produce the new officer. So, Judy, if you're going to join this committee, we could find, a separate email to the existing Albany County commissioners, asking them to come up with someone to fill that. In the past, when I've done it, I haven't had to make too many phone calls. It's really mostly been done by email.
Yeah, I've done it in the past too. Long
Judy just froze.
feel you.
Sometimes the gravity of Crystal Lake really sucks up the Wi-Fi.
We didn't
Yeah.
hear you, Judy, because
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. We do have bad Wi-Fi. What I said is if you feel you need help, I'm more than happy to help, Barbara.
Okay,
Did you hear that?
yes, I did. So when I send out the emails, it'll be from both of us. I'll CC.
That's fine. That's
Thank you
fine.
very much.
It sounds like we have 2 volunteers, so the board action is requested to appoint the nominating committee of Barbara Morrow and Judy Bressler.
Could we have a motion for the appointment of the nominating committee?
I'll make the motion. Shaughnessy?
Second,
I'll second. Stallone.
all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Then congratulations, Barbara and Judy.
Oh, great, thanks.
Our next item is the NYSERDA internship application.
Sure. This is another example of our staff being entrepreneurial and identifying, programs that can help us out. So Todd and the Clean Energy team identified the NYSERDA Clean Energy Internship Program, which will cover 90% of the wages for an intern working on sustainability issues. So the terms of the program are generally outlined in the memo. Mike Stammel on the A&F committee meeting wanted me to identify, what our actual cash match would be. So the cash match is 10% of the wage rate, and it also does not cover fringe. So if we assume a $17 an hour internship with the maximum hours that the program allows of 960, the total wages would equal just over 16,000. Of that, we would receive 90% or just over 14,000. We would have to cover about $3,100 inclusive of that 10% match and the fringe. So board action is requested to authorize staff to apply for the NYSERDA Clean Energy Internship Program.
Are there any questions? Then could we have a motion to authorize staff to apply for the NYSERDA internship application?
So moved.
I'll second it. Hogan can.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Then it's authorized. The next item is the EDA Subaward Committee update.
The committee had its first meeting last week, and representatives on the committee include Craig Warner, Mike Stammel, Gary Hughes, and Lucy McKnight. The first item on the committee's agenda was to determine some of the parameters of the subaward program. We explained to the committee the various slings and arrows we were suffering working with EDA to identify what the rules are. We feel that we've established what the rules are. So, again, as a reminder, the subaward program contemplates distributing $200,000 of the EDA CARES Act funding to regional economic development organizations or agencies working on pandemic recovery projects. The committee at its first meeting determined that an equitable distribution of those $200,000 would mean an equal distribution of $50,000 each to each county. There was a spirited debate on that point, but the committee in the end came to that consensus. The next steps for staff and the committee are to reach out to entities that would be supported by the counties to receive these subawards and to work with those entities to establish scopes of work, more specific scopes of work that meet the federal criteria for the program, and then also make sure that they meet the federal financial and reporting criteria for the reimbursement end of it. So I'd just like to thank those members for working with us on that.
Are there any questions? And the next item is the staff activity report.
Staff continue to do an amazing job working remotely in hybrid schedules. Staff come into the office in person a couple of days a week and then work remotely the remainder. I myself typically come into the office most days, but I think the name of the game, as we've discussed previously, is flexibility. My son was currently banned from daycare because he had a flu shot and ran a fever yesterday, so he can't go to daycare for the rest of the week, which means I need to go home after this meeting so my wife can teach her classes from our home office. So I'll watch Theo for the rest of the day. So again, flexibility is key. I'd like to thank the staff for being flexible and continuing to figure out ways where we can do our business and help communities within our current situation. We have hosted in-person socially distanced meetings in the conference room. Staff continue to use our Zoom platform to assist local governments and others do meetings and conduct some business. So, really pleased with how everything's working out. And again, testament to the staff for rising to the occasion amidst all the challenges that we're facing. We took action on this at the last meeting, and huge kudos to Todd and the Clean Energy team for securing the $5.3 million NYSERDA grant. We are in the process of contracting. We're still waiting for, I think, signatures from NYSERDA to finalize that contract, but the program is starting to get up and running as we speak. Just going through some other activities of the staff report. Our fall webinars, our spring webinar series was an outstanding success. Staff was able to pivot very quickly to convert our live in-person events into a digital webinar series. It actually continued through the summer, and we had over 780 registrants for that webinar series, and I think very compelling and relevant topics. We launched our fall webinar series last week, and we will continue to have weekly webinars weekly Wednesday webinars through December. I'd like to thank Martin Daly in particular for taking on the lion's share of the logistics of setting up those webinars. I think it's a great example of how we're pivoting in the new environment and continuing to make sure that we're serving our core audiences of planning and zoning board members and giving them the training that they need to do the work that they do. Some data updates. Josh Toshi and Kate Maynard are continuing to work to develop sort of custom data visualizations that focus on our current economic crisis. We're continuing to build out sort of a COVID recovery / economic dashboard that includes a number of Tableau visualizations from cost of living to employment to sector-based employment. You'll be seeing more of those visualizations come out as we promote them in social media and roll them up into our next data news project. So thank you to Kate and Josh for thinking creatively about those things. Our Census Mapper continues to be updated with the latest iteration of the ACS, and also our Capital Region Indicators website continues to be improved. We are currently working with the folks at the Avail Lab to make improvements to the data visualizations and also to the mapping function. And we have secured additional funding through the Capital Region Chamber and our partners at the Capital District Transportation Committee to do a variety of improvements over the next 12 months.
Sorry, if someone's typing, could they please put themselves on mute?
There we go. Thank you, Kristen. We've heard all about the successes of the Clean Energy Communities program. In our the initial outreach for the new iteration of the program, heavily referencing the successes of the previous program will be, I think, core to some of that initial outreach work. The Clean Heating and Cooling campaign continues to convert business leads for 6 installer partners that have been engaged under that program to, again, encourage folks to convert their heating sources to ground or air source heat pumps. One of our, and this is the 3rd iteration of our technical assistance program in partnership with the Capital District Transportation Committee. And we are, I think, having good success at doing discrete projects for communities in our 4 counties that, really benefit them. So here's just an update of the projects that we've been working on over the past 4 to 6 months. We've completed a project in the Western Clifton Park Development and Conservation area that will lead up to an update of their 2005 generic environmental impact statement. Todd did a significant amount of the mapping, and other staff contributed to that report, working closely with the planning staff in Clifton Park. We're still working with folks in East Greenbush on the Gilligan Road Complete Streets Enhancements feasibility study. This project is more within the bailiwick of the Capital District Transportation Committee, but we're contributing nonetheless. We still are working with the folks in Glenville to do a zoning code analysis, particularly as it relates to Route 50. Martin and Kate have been doing a great job working with their planning team to do zoning code audits and to really work with them to think in new ways about how their zoning can be improved to get them to where they want to be with that corridor. And of course, the Town of Westerlo's Comprehensive Plan Committee in Albany County, working with them on an existing conditions analysis and some base mapping, is got them on their way well on their way into their comprehensive planning process. So another good example of partnering with our with CDTC, and then bringing benefits and direct benefits to communities and increasing capacity in those communities to get these sorts of projects done. So it's a great example of a new program that's evolving that is really benefiting communities in our county. Outside of that, we have you may have seen an announcement come out of Congressman Tonko's office about $1 million that was received for the Monument Square project in Troy. Through the Northern Border Regional Commission. The CDRPC became the local development district for the NBRC back in 2018. And this is the first significant grant in our region that we've been able to assist with, and assisted the city of Troy and the Troy Local Development Corporation in securing. We'll be receiving a modest amount of funding for helping to administer the federal grant. But it's a great example of how we're positioned to connect communities to these federal resources that can bring significant investments to support private investments into our communities. CARES Act, I'd just like to point out that Kate Maynard has been doing a great job in helping to work with EDA to identify the specifics of program administration for the CARES Act. And again, continuing to think creatively about building out our economic dashboard on our website to communicate the economic impacts and the economic recovery, as we proceed through the recovery phase of the pandemic. Another element that kind of flew under the radar, but I'll mention it again, is we were happy to assist the Capital Region Chamber in securing $8 million to capitalize what is now a regional revolving loan fund, again, expanded from Albany County to now serve the counties, all of our 4 counties in the region. And again, it was, really Kate's effort to serve up this opportunity to the chamber on a silver platter and assisting them in scheduling calls with EDA to figuring out how to make it work. So, just a good example of how we're trying to do all that we can to make sure we're bringing federal resources through the programs that we manage to the region. Just a couple other updates. Kate's involved in the Capital Region Boot Camp, which is a good program. Martin Daly, and this is where bureaucrats really love to shine. And I remember Martin having a comment.
Oh boy, where is this going?
I remember Martin having a comment coming out of one of the CSO meetings. He's like, I love when we get stuff done at a meeting. And but Martin was able to pull together some of the funding agencies, EFC and Troy and Albany, to walk through umpteen projects that are reimbursable, but for which EDA did not have consistent records from the communities. So it's really to get everyone on the same page. And Martin's work really resulted in the funding agency simply using Martin's work and converting his work as their records to authorize disbursements of millions of dollars to the communities for infrastructure projects related to CSO. So, oftentimes these meetings are not, are not sexy, but when you're talking about millions of dollars and facilitating the disbursement of millions of dollars for infrastructure projects, they're critically important to the work that we do. And just like to thank Martin for making that happen, bringing people physically into the office to have that meeting and going through each project and getting all those details squared away. Anything else you want to add on CSO, Martin?
Nope, we're just optimistic that we can continue to work through that process so Albany and Troy can continue to draw down on the money that they're financing.
Thank you. Another significant project that we're working on is some source water protection related to the Waterville Reservoir. Todd has been working on a variety of map series, and Martin has been working on the stakeholder engagement in this process. Protecting source water is a critical priority for New York State and DEC at this point. And our first project in that space is an update of previous work that we did related to the Waterville Reservoir. And that really impacts stakeholders in Guilderland and Rotterdam and other communities that are in the watershed that impact the Waterville Reservoir. We are in our next phase planning to work with the city of Troy on a watershed protection plan for the Tomahawk Reservoir. And again, leveraging our historic experience and putting these pieces together to focus on the steps that the communities that surround these water bodies and are within these watersheds, the steps that they can take to ensure that these reservoirs that are used for drinking water are not contaminated, and that people in those communities can have clean water. So definitely significant. On the human services front, the Capital District Youth Center, we just completed a $90,000 bedroom furniture replacement project, which was delayed due to the New York pause. So we got that completed, and there are a variety of other issues that I won't go into detail with, but the CDYCI board is assisting with. In closing the staff report, again, I'd just like to thank the staff for rising to the occasion during the challenging times and for continuing to be entrepreneurial and effective and creative in securing new funding sources, deploying new programs, and working together with me to make sure that CDRPC is continuing to provide services to our counties and the communities that we serve. Any questions?
I just have one on the Tomahawk watershed. Now, I know that that's kind of owned by the city of Troy, but it resides in the town of Schaghticoke and Valley Falls and, other areas. So are those people aware of this or part of any of the planning for that vision, since the water is in our area and we'll be responsible for keeping that, uncontaminated?
Yeah, they were involved in the initial planning process back in 2000, and we'll certainly involve them as stakeholders moving forward in this process. Obviously, their participation is critical to the success of recommendations that ultimately become part of that report.
Okay, that's great. Yeah, because they can be to their advantage too,
Absolutely. Yeah, the unique thing about this resource and the City of Waterville's reservoir is they're wholly contained within a separate municipality from the one that actually relies on the resource or owns it. So this is not a unique situation to the Tomahawk. It's a common theme we're seeing with watershed protection across the state. So we're eager to work with those communities that surround the water body as well as the communities that own the resource.
All right, thanks. That's great.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any other questions or other business to discuss? No, if not, our next meeting is going to be December 16th at 10 a.m. Could I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make that motion.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Then we're adjourned. Thank
Thank
you.
you.